let's now continue with our second news of the day. Is the fact that, like I've said, Mikhail Gorbachev, leader of the Soviet Union, last leader of the Soviet Union, has died. Um, Quite a controversial figure in terms of how he's viewed in the West, in like United States or Western Europe, versus how he's seen in Eastern Europe, versus how he's seen in ex-USSR countries, specifically like in Russia or Belarus, for example. Can't speak too much for Ukraine because I haven't spoken with Ukrainian people about their views on Gorbachev. But the the fact that he is so sort of controversial, um, in well, first of all, in Russia, basically people who like my parents, for example, they blame Gorbachev basically for for a collapse of USSR. That's their position basically. They grew up. Well, they didn't grow up. They went through um, total collapse of the country that they were led to believe this really giant, great, amazing country that's gonna be like, or that is a dominant country, like number one or two in the world. Blah blah blah. All this nonsense. Um, and then suddenly, and then suddenly, when it's when they're like in their like 30s, so like right like middle age basically, your life is kind of just like beginning basically. You're earning good money, you're doing more or less well, or you're just like earning money, you're living on your own, like you're doing jobs, you're trying to enjoy uh, life and so on and so forth. And then boom, suddenly everything collapses. And because he's at the head of the state at that time, he's the one to blame, which is really absurd, in my opinion, because the things that he's done for, first of all, for humanity as a whole, is nothing sort of a miracle in some way. I mean, he was a product of his system. I'm gonna talk about it slightly a little bit later. So we shouldn't like people shouldn't just like praise him, or people shouldn't just criticize him, because none of the positions is actually reasonable, to be honest. But the fact that, like, just imagine it, right? Like in USSR, there was no private property. You could not do business. You couldn't be like entrepreneur. No freedom of speech of any kind. Censorship, like this is just a standard practice, basically. This dude, I mean, maybe he tried to preserve Soviet Union by like giving people, or like thinking that if he will give people certain liberties, certain freedoms, it's gonna somehow like prolong the USSR. Maybe, I'm not totally sure like what was his reasoning exactly, but he did it regardless. Perestroika, glasnost, all this, those are the terms that even I'm assuming Western people know, or like heard of at least. Um, which is like you cannot like understate those. These are crucial things. Like obviously, right now you can see that Russia has become once again a totalitarian dictatorship shithole. The same can be said about many other actually states, ex-USSR states. The same can be stated about Belarus, for example. It's also dictatorship, fucking nightmare. So in the end, it's all been for nothing if we kind of sum it up. And the man has seen transition from USSR collapse, and first of all from USSR being this closed off country, and from being this sort of once again authoritarian communist, quite dystopia, to be honest, because if we compare the standards of living like 1980s, for example, in United States and in USSR, and for example what type of things could a worker, like a regular worker in, like, I don't know, freaking Ford factory, could buy in 1980s in United States, and what he had or they had in their kitchen, for example, versus what Russians or USSR, Soviet people at the time had in their kitchens or in their houses in general, things that they could buy. It's night and day. It's night and day, and it's not even like comparable. People in the United States would have like 150 square meters on average, basically the houses. In Soviets, it would be like 40 square meters, little two or like like 2 room apartment, not 2 bedroom apartment, 2 room apartment, kitchen, 2 rooms, bathroom, no access. You could not buy a car even if you had a lot of money in USSR, 80s, whatever. To buy a car, you had to either kind of bribe somebody or be high up some official or have some connections, because the country didn't produce mass market products basically for their people. It was all about, or mostly was about, this like Cold War, producing arms. That's why, like, still Russia till this day, 30 years later, they still right now in Ukraine using old Soviet tanks. Why? Because they've produced so many of them, obviously. And that's why, like, that's why when I'm like talking to people of older generation in Belarus or in Russia, wherever, and they blame Gorbachev for perestroika, for all of this, for collapsing Soviet Union, I'm like, dude, like, have you read even like a Wikipedia article about USSR? Like, I understand that people like have this really weird, um, really weird sort of mindfuckery that because it was their past, right? Because it was their youth, for example, right? There, I mean, it's a psychological, obviously, trickery of the brain to see it that way. Like, everything was greener back then, but back when I was younger, and life was full of potential, basically, and then everything got fucked up as it essentially eventually does. But just to like not even acknowledge the fact that I mean, like, talking, if I would be talking like to older people, right, like, or even like my parents, so like, you've been there, like, you've seen that shit, like, you when you tried to sell like a pair of jeans out of your bag, basically, like, in some kind of a undercover way kind of a scenario, like, you've been even caught doing so by police because it was prohibited. Like, how can this be a good society when you are not allowed to make your own money by ways that you can do it, like how you see fit? Like, the only way to make money is to work for some giant national factory, uh, governmental owned factory, something like. How is that a good society? And this man tried to, like, obviously, once again, I cannot claim that that I know about what was in his mind, and so and so on forth. But the fact that this policy of glasnost, once again, free speech and freedom of press, and also um, switching from like planned economy to market-based economy, perestroika, restructuring of the system, like, things needed to change, but things needed to change 10, 15 years before him, before when it was done. um, like, it should have been done a long time ago, and to blame this man for once again for collapse, like, this is so weird. This is so weird and fucked up how some people um, don't see what he's done, and especially because some people don't even think about the fact that he basically ended Cold War and limited nuclear weapons, destroyed a lot of nuclear weapons, and for this thing alone, he should be like at least not hated. Just the fact that he recognized that this Cold War can lead into disastrous results, and the state of the rising tensions could lead to absolute disaster and catastrophe for the whole world. For this fact alone, he should be at least like mildly admired, if nothing else. I mean, surely, once again, he had his problems, but that's what I'm saying. Like, he was a part of the system, and he was a man of his time. It's kind of weird and a man of his own upbringing, right? Like, you can't just expect somebody from like in the 1980s to do the same decisions as somebody in 2020 would do. The culture has changed, the world has changed, our perception of certain things has changed. And so the man was the man of his time. And so obviously that's why I wanted to bring it up and sort of put this whole episode basically around his death, because I was reading Twitter today, and there's been two views on him. Once again, I'm saying like, or actually three, but since I was using reading Twitter in English, two views on him. One is from Baltic states that were occupied by USSR, and this is basically how like the East-West divide, basically East-West in Europe even, or like Western, like I said, like Western Europe, UK, United States versus Eastern Europe. Mikhail Gorbachev was a trusted, respected leader, played a crucial role to end Cold War and bring down the Iron Curtain. It opened way for a free Europe. The legacy of one will not be forgotten. This is by Ursula von der Leyen, and another one, Gabrielius Landsbergis. Lithuanians will not glorify Gorbachev. We will never forget the simple fact that his army murdered civilians to prolong his regime's occupation of our country. His soldiers fired on our unarmed protesters and crushed them under his tanks. This is how we will remember him. And just to clarify, like, nothing good about this, obviously, but during those protests and during that, he tried to prolong. Like, he didn't want USSR to die. He probably wanted it to transform, I guess, into something different. But 15 people died under those like squashing of those protests. 15. How many people could have died if the arms race and nuclear race would have continued and continued and continued? And also think about it, like, if instead of Gorbachev at his place at that time would be someone like Putin, for example. Can you just imagine how much more brutal that whole situation would have been? How much more blood would have been spilled? Do you think someone like Putin would actually allow 15 people to be killed and then call it a day? That's it? Like, every life is absolutely sacred. This is a paramount of, should be, at least in my view, it is the paramount sort of value, actually, just the life of a human being. So any life just ended, killed, especially when it's about like giant country tries to suppress just a regular human being, or in this case human beings who gathered to protest as state, or in this case occupation of their country. This is absolutely unjustifiable in my view. However, there are different sort of tiers, and tiers of goodness, of evil, of anything really, right? And so if on one hand the guy denuclearized to a large extent Russia and stopped this escalation war with United States, once again, the fall of Berlin Wall, the um, those reforms that he's tried to, well, he implemented, some successful, some less so successful, and as we're seeing right now, Russia and Belarus, they haven't really transitioned fully from this autocratic, power hungry uh, states, basically, right? But again, on one hand, there's evil that's done by him. On the other hand, there's positive things that he's done. I feel like, and again, being the product of his own system, right? He's been brought up in USSR, right? So like the fact that he even had those ideas and opinions of the world, right? Way more democratic than anything else seen before or even after him. Seriously. Like, just think about it. Like, for a Communist Party member to think that you need freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of like elections, basically, all those things, just to like, you have to understand that if you are being brought up in an environment that is absolutely antithesis to all those things that you later will implement, or at least like try to implement successfully, more so, less so, doesn't matter, but just the fact that you even have those ideas, that's already an accomplishment. It is right now so easy to forget that it's 1980s, 1970s. There's no internet, there's no like free access to information from across the world on the palm of your hand at all the times. And it's like, how, like, there's no ability to like fact check things quickly, right? Like, it's so like easy to forget all those things right now, right? Like, because right now somebody says something, you spend 2 seconds, you fact check it with the internet, you boom, you're a smart ass, right? Back then, to educate yourself, to even see like the humanity as a whole, basically, versus rather than like we versus them kind of a scenario. Again, this whole Cold War scenario versus United States. Like, to even see the necessity to end this is remarkable in and of itself. Remarkable, I think. And once again, people just don't think that he is not a person living right now. He was a person living back then, and he had those views, and he, in the Communist Party, with this whole giant communistic apparatus, he was still able to implement at least certain changes. Just people don't really like, they're just taking this approach, or oh, like, he tried to basically suppress the protests in Tbilisi, Vilnius, Riga, Almaty, Baku, and also Chernobyl. Also, not apparently, obviously, happened on his watch. But once again, I feel like the goods he's done, the things he's done, outweigh the bad ones, in my opinion, anyway. In my opinion. But this view of Sergei Sumlenny, Berlin-based Eastern Europe expert, so-called, he was a criminal who ordered to violently suppress peaceful protests in Riga, Vilnius again, and other cities. He was cheered in the West because the West did not care about dead Kazakhs or Lithuanians. It's a pity he was never tried in court. This is so brain dead. This is so brain dead. And he compares Gorbachev. The Western fascination by Gorbachev reminds me of the fascination by Pinochet one can witness in some post-Soviet countries, a totally fake image based on whitewashing of bloody regimes. I mean, to some degree, he's not wrong, but at the same time, when right now some peaceful protest happen, or maybe less so peaceful protest, but protest happens somewhere in United States or in France or in Germany, and when police, for example, uses like force, basically, either with water jets or with rubber bullets, so on and so forth. Like, will those people be tried? Will those prime ministers or presidents will be tried for that kind of thing, with that dealing with protesters? Not really. It's happening across the whole world forever, been happening, and yeah, it's the state. It's the state of affairs, and it is this uh, just the situation, like individual versus the state. I would always side with an individual. I think, once again, one individual is the paramount value in this whole universe. Life of a person and just his or hers ability to express themselves in any way they want. So far as they're like not hurting other people, obviously, or not like destroying other people's property, obvious things. And so if people want to protest, go and protest. If there is a protest, then probably something is going wrong. And you should kind of take a look at what is being protested. But this position of this so-called expert, Eastern Europe expert, is just, what kind of fucking expert would say that? And not mention other good things that the guy has done. Just the shit Kant is doing for clicks, for likes and retweets. Certain deaths. Once again, dear people of the West, Regina Bauer, Petit Michel on Twitter. Wow, what a name. Dear people in the West, Gorbachev was not a peacebringer. Quieted down Chernobyl disasters, sent tanks against armed civilians in occupied republics, 13 dead. Now in 2014, celebrated Crimea annexation, which is, once again, it tells you slightly a little bit more about about him as a person. But when you're like 80, people for some reason become senile and stupid. He didn't cheer. This lady does not mention that he didn't cheer for Putin really, at least when it was like middays, basically mid like 2000s. At the beginning, he was all right with Putin, but later, not really. Where I want to find, I want to go basically through certain points in his, well, not his biography, but basically his views on certain events. So let's just start with Chechen wars, right? Like Russia fought 2 Chechen wars, and Gorbachev was against this, and he was criticizing Boris Yeltsin for this. And actually, he was saying that he was regretting the fact that he was not able to quiet down Yeltsin, or make sure that basically he wouldn't be in power in Russia, stuff like that. And that's like one thing. And he was even saying in 2003 that Gorbachev was saying that he wouldn't even shake hand of Yeltsin. He never spoke, and never seen him since December of 1991. That's respectable, right here, right there. So that was 2003, like I'm saying. Then later in 10 years, he will show certain really stupid shit. But in 2002, he had seen Putin, and he was sort of all right with him. He didn't see problems, although even back then you could have probably noticed already problems. But in 2008, he was saying that Russian voting system basically needs reformations, needs change, and the election process is not all right. And he was also talking about Putin and Medvedev tandem, and this fucking switcheroo that they've done. And he was also saying that I'm ashamed. Um, I'm ashamed for them. I'm ashamed in general. And they basically, they're not even thinking about the society as if the society does not exist. It's like they've become this rulers, the saviors of the motherland, and I don't like it. That's his words. And where are we, 140 million people? Where are we? I don't like it. That's his words. Like, that's already quite commendable. Yeah, sure. Once again, later he will, yeah. Unfortunately, I just don't get like Russians and just some people's obsession with Crimea being Russian somehow, and this old shit that every person that's obsessed with Crimea being Russian retells over and over again that drunk fucking or whoever it was, Khrushchev or wherever, gifted it to Ukraine and it should have been Russia's territory all along. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? It's been like that for years, decades. Like, why do you fucking care? If you were not in war with Russia that you started in 2014, you could fucking visit Crimea, no fucking problem whatsoever. Like, if you like Crimea so much. Plus, Russia has their own Sochi, Krasnodar. Like, what's the fucking problem with? It's the same Black Sea. You don't like Ukraine so much that you think Ukraine's territory should be part of Russia somehow because of some old shit that you've never even been around to catch that moment when somehow Crimea stopped being Russian territory, or it was never Russian territory. Let's put it that way. First of all, it's been USSR back then. But like, why the fuck do you care and obsess so much? So whatever. Apparently, about the Crimea, that Gorbachev said that he's approving that because people, Crimeans, voted yes, which is like, dude, are you following? I mean, it's 2014. How old would he be in 2014? Um, when was he born? When was he born? He was born in 1931, right? 1931. He was 83 at the time when he was saying that he's approving that kind of a shit, which is, again, yeah, old age should not excuse you from being stupid. Should not. But at the same time, he was 83, for fuck's sake. Um, yeah. Which is, once again, I don't understand people's obsession with Crimea. I mean, when I was a kid, I've been in Crimea many times, or even like youth, whatever, basically before the annexation. I was in Crimea many times. No disrespect to Crimeans, but it ain't that fucking good. It's like, it's like bare minimum kind of shit. Not particularly great. Like, I mean, granted, I've never spent like hundreds or thousands of dollars for like a night stay or something like that. We've been always kind of traveling cheap. And that's why people actually went to Crimea versus something like Bulgaria or wherever, Italy, France, whatever the fuck, right? Because it was relatively cheap. You could see also the sea. That's it. But the service was never really that great. Once again, the apartments or like little huts were always kind of cheap and shit, kind of looking, and inside also sort of decrepit and just. I mean, it's not that great. So like this whole fucking obsession with Crimea is like, I don't get it. Really don't get it. Just from this perspective of like, it's not even that fucking amazing. So it's like, this is not like fucking Nice in France or whatever, or some whatever, like top block, or fucking Cyprus. I don't know. Insert your own great destination. So yeah, whatever. But the fact that this guy at 83 already kind of lost his mind, like people voted unilaterally yes for reconnection basically with Russia. Like, what are you fucking smoking, dude? When people with guns come to your house and say, "Do you want us to take your house?" Oh, you said yes? We heard that correctly. Okay, good. Like, what are you expected to do? You say no, you got shot, you getting shot, and then they still take what they wanted to take. The fact that he said this, like, very brain dead, very brain dead. So yeah, basically, once he started to get old, apparently, some of the thing, or maybe it was always in his mind, and in like, yeah, I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, this is like one thing that is quite appalling, to be honest. But once again, this should not be the other thing that he's done should not be understated. But yeah, the Chernobyl disaster is obviously, well, it's a disaster, and the coverage, or not coverage, cover up of it was despicable, really despicable. I don't know how much he knew himself. I did not read about it like today to like refresh my memory in a way. But because you must understand, right? Like Western people should understand that if we are talking about autocracies or dictatorship countries or some countries that resemble that, and listen, communistic countries with this like whole apparatus of this whole machinery that's created this like hierarchies in the sense that your boss can like almost like can toy with you in a sense, like ruin your life completely or not. Like, you're gonna be very careful to what you sending up the ladder, the information you're sending up the ladder. You can see it right now in Russia because frankly, unfortunately, and this is one unfortunate thing that those Gorbachev reforms did not do, they didn't really reform it. Because all those people, all those cunts who were in power back then, or who were like on the rise, or whose lives were kind of, not destroyed, but like shaken, let's put it that way, during this whole collapse of Soviet Union, they held that disgruntlement, I guess, like the just they held the resentment, I guess, like Putin, and he created basically his own version of USSR. And so once again, what I'm trying to say is that when you're creating this like vertical hierarchy, when the person on top can not only fire you, but probably like put you in jail with some fabricated case or something like that, that creates really unhealthy dynamics. And so what you will report to your, say, like, managers on top, managers is such a Western world, to people on top of you, will always be skewed towards, oh, everything is great, everything's amazing. So I'm not sure like how well aware was Gorbachev of what was going on, because once again, I haven't read exactly like what was happening during that time, and how much he knew, and so on and so forth. And also, let's not forget that Chernobyl is Ukrainian territory. So people right now saying that Gorbachev covered up Chernobyl basically, and ordered the parade on like 1st of May, which is like I guess International Labor Day or something like that. Which, I mean, it is Labor Day definitely here. I don't know how much of international it is. he ordered to still have this parade and like pretend like nothing is happening, so on and so forth, which is despicable, and like it's really despicable. But yeah, so like once again, I'm not sure how much he actually knew, how well aware he was, because I could easily see the situation when people on the bottom reported perhaps everything correctly, like people on the ground basically reported everything how it's been basically, even though like a lot of them in the first days even didn't really understand like the scale of the tragedy. But then higher ups who either oversee the people because of whom actually Chernobyl disaster happened, or their higher ups, whatever, they probably didn't want, or I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I haven't researched it prior to this episode, so forgive me, please, for just like going on rants. But I can totally see that person does not want to report exactly what happened to a higher up in like Communist Party or something like that, because that could come with a lot of wrath onto them. And once again, it could end up in some jail times and so on and so forth. So I could totally see how cover up might have been happening already on the way to the top of the top. Because, like I said, this is exactly what's happened in Russia right now before this invasion. People like the smaller officers, bureaucrats in army who were stealing whatever they can and selling shit and earning that way money for themselves. They were reporting on papers that everything is alright to higher up, to their higher up, and then their higher ups were reporting to their higher ups, and those higher ups were reporting to Kremlin. And the Kremlin was fucking reporting to Putin himself, right? And so this kind of through this chain of broken telephone, Putin might have had an idea that not might have, he definitely had an idea that the army is in completely different state that it actually was. Because you need to remember also, we're talking about fucking Russia, and it's been documented case from freaking hundreds from Russian Empire states. Potemkinskaya деревня, Potemkin village. That's the term that's been invented not today and not yesterday. Like literally before some higher up visits some factory, city, wherever, everything is renovated, everything is polished, everything looks fancy, new, shiny, amazing. That's just a facade. If you come any other day, or if you actually take a look behind the facade, you see the total destruction, chaos, and just the whole shittery of the situation. So I can definitely see that he might have not been like properly instructed on just the scale of the disaster. I'm not sure, once again. But to simply hate him for this, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you can just simply hate him for ordering this parade on 1st of May and so on and so forth. I don't know. Perhaps he, perhaps like, I don't know, like the meteorologist or somebody like that group said that, okay, the wind is not blowing in the direction of Kiev or something like that. And it wouldn't be that devastating to actually like go through all of this. Because obviously, like, you could also see it. I mean, one thing is a cover up, yes, of course. Let's pretend that nothing. And this is once again to the discussion of he was a product of the time, of the system that's where he grew up and that's brought him. This whole save your face kind of a thing, kind of a scenario, is absolutely prevalent in USSR, was prevalent in USSR, and is still very much so present in Russia. And as I'm watching and I'm reading about China, it is very much present in China. Admitting to your own mistakes is a sign of weakness. Apologizing for anything is a sign of weakness. actually fixing your own shit. This is like, wow, what the fuck we even talking about. So the fact that he would want to save the face of whatever United USSR, um, once again, product of the system. I can totally see it. Is it good? Not at all. Obviously, you must be able to admit to your own faults, especially when it's a fucking nuclear disaster and it affects not only you and not only your country, um, but even neighboring countries. So especially when it's like so dangerous, right? And um, approximately 70% of that radionuclear waste landed in Belarus, and I know it basically firsthand because I grew up and I live in the southeastern southeastern part of Belarus, exactly basically the territory that received, or not exactly, but basically the territory of Belarus that received most of this nuclear waste, nuclear fallout, I guess, contaminants, so on and so forth. And as I was growing up, like my parents were advised, and I was taking like iodine, for example, to make sure that my what's the word thyroidal thyroid gland would work properly, and so on and so forth. So I know, like from first-hand experience, that it's not all fun and dandy. Nothing fun about it at all. Thyroid cancer is and was like maybe not cancer, but some problems with thyroids were a problem for quite a lot of people in my region, in Gomel region of Belarus. So yeah, nothing fun about it, nothing good about it. But once again, when you weigh on scales the good he's done and the bad he's done, I think Gorbachev should be remembered once again as a good leader. Um, Even despite the fact that his later remarks about the annexation of Crimea, not particularly great, not particularly great. Um, Once again, I'm not sure if he really wanted if he really wanted to kind of transform USSR, or was he just trying to like adapt as it went, to just like prevent it from collapsing, basically. And all those measures were almost accidental in a way. I can't say. I haven't studied him that well. I haven't read about him enough to actually, or haven't watched like his interviews and so on and so forth enough to know that the answer. And I think I'm gonna do it in like in the future. Maybe we'll try to read and watch a little bit more about him. But um, I don't think it is justifiable that people from like Baltic states or so-called fucking Eastern European experts, for fuck's sake, give me a fucking break, expert, um, just call him, despicable murderer and so on and so forth. I think it is so disrespectful and missing so many points. And very interesting video I've seen on Deutsche Welle. They've asked people on the streets, I don't know on the streets of which city, but in Germany, asked what they think about Gorbachev. But interestingly, like a lot of those people were older, from ranging anywhere from like 45 to like 70. There were like few people. I mean, and also I don't know obviously how many people they've asked that gave them different kind of answers that maybe wouldn't like fit Deutsche Welle's kind of, I guess, agenda, if they're pursuing any agenda with this video. But all of them, I'm not even kidding, all of them in that video unanimously basically said that they think of him very well and like very kindly, and like the Germany as they see it right now, right here, wouldn't be the Germany that they see it right now, because he helped to he helped reunify, I guess, right, the reunification of two Germanys, and they see him as a good. And also, we had Saint Just Germany saying hi in the chat. I'm sorry, I've noticed it just right now, but it's kind of interesting that I'm talking about Germany and I see Saint Just Germany in the Twitch chat. I'm wondering. I don't know if you're watching still right now, but and also by the way, thank you for following. If you're still watching, I wonder if you're from Germany, how do you see Gorbachev? And if you've talked about him with whatever friends and family, how do they see him? Because it's so interesting that in Germany it's like again, based on this video, unanimously as a good person. It's really interesting. Yeah. Okay, I feel like that's actually, I wanted to make today's episode rather short, and I wanted to talk about these two topics, and especially about Gorbachev, because yeah, I just think it's so unfair. First of all, so basically like he's more hated than he's loved, at least in Russian speaking, or well, yeah, at least in Russian speaking world. It is so interesting. So interesting. So interesting. Just the fact that he was able to push this glasnost reform, openness, or like I mean, right now it's all being ripped away. It's all being destroyed, and that's why I feel like this is so, like, he died at the age of 91. I feel like this is so probably, it was probably so frustrating for him to see just what kind of state Russia has turned, what kind of a country Russia has become, and the fact that his main things that he pushed, they're basically destroyed right now, because freedom of speech is non-existent, not in Belarus, not in Russia. To a degree, even not in Ukraine, because listen, to a degree, even not anywhere in the world, but obviously, definitely not in Russia, not in Belarus. So that's been destroyed, and this is one of the most important things. I mean, 1984 is about this. Like, one of the greatest dystopian books of the century, of many centuries probably, is about the language, is about the fact that you must be able to say anything openly and freely without being feared of prosecution. And you cannot do it anymore right now in Belarus or in Russia. They're banning websites, they're banning media, they're jailing people for posts in VK, in Facebook, whatever, in Twitter. That is not great. That is the death of society. And so for him, for Gorbachev, to actually see his own creation basically, falling apart like that, I don't know. I feel like it must be so painful. And probably, like, I don't know. Once again, I haven't seen too many interviews with him, but if I were him, and I knew that this is my legacy, like those terms people know even on the West, perestroika, glasnost, and I've tried to do it, I have done it, but then people are blaming me for all the shit that's been accumulating in USSR from years and years and years prior. and then my main creations are being totally demolished and destroyed in later years of Russia, of Belarus, and those countries are just turning into dictatorship states. Damn, I don't know. Like, I would blame myself a lot on not doing enough, not actually doing enough, to actually truly transform the country. Because what, like I've said before, like those people who were like sort of on the rise or working apparatchika, as there's this term, like basically bureaucrats, they've seen this collapse of USSR, and then they decided to recreate it. Putin, Lukashenko, those cons, but recreate it around themselves basically. This is just so, yeah. I feel like if I would be Gorbachev, I would be thinking like, fuck me, I haven't done enough. And unfortunately, the transformation has never actually occurred, finalized, actually happened. Like true transformation from being this um, totalitarian state into a truly democratic state, which is true. It like there were things in Russia that were happening in early 2000s. They had a chance, but they got Putin. And once again, it's a product of a system. Instead of like new wave of good um, oppositionists, I guess, kind of people, democratic leaning, so on and so forth. Like they just got someone put in place. I mean, it's in his name, Putin, right? Put in. It's like this fucking. Sometimes I just feel like I'm living in a simulation because Putin was literally put in place by Yeltsin. He was not elected leader. Nobody nobody elected him. Can you just imagine? Can you just stop for a second and think about this fact that Putin, whatever is running this simulation, this AI, whatever created this world, it's like so blatant. It's so like on the nose. It's funny sometimes, but Putin was put in place by Yeltsin, never elected, and that's what's happened 20 years later. The country that Gorbachev tried to preserve, I guess, but to put on like on those rails of democracy and freedom, it's been derailed. It's been derailed. Really sad. Really, truly, truly sad. Um, but yeah, not much else to talk about it. Um, I think he deserves more praise than hatred for sure. It's really disheartening to see the way he's being viewed in post USSR, ex USSR countries, on at least like from the people that I've talked, and I don't have like intelligentsia kind of people surrounding me, fortunately or unfortunately. Um, so maybe in certain families he would be viewed, or he was viewed, or he is viewed in a very positive light. Unfortunately, like my family and people that I have spoken, older people that I have spoken with, they all view basically him as this villain uh, who broke apart Soviet Union, this mighty Soviet Union that couldn't even create fucking toasters and dishwashers and fucking cars. Fuck everything about that country. Yeah. Once again, rest in peace, Gorbachev. I think for the humanity, you've done a lot, and yeah, it's really unfortunate to see some people. Some people really having a wrong opinion, in my view, on him. Okay, I think I'm gonna end it here. I hope you have a good day, and yeah, join next week. I'm streaming on Wednesdays. And please subscribe to the channel, YouTube channel, Critical Discussions. Take a look at shorter videos. Take a look at longer videos. I am basically bringing you news about Russia, about Ukraine, translating to you certain news, certain information from Russian, so you can stay sort of slightly in the loop and understand better what's going on inside Russia. And yeah. Okay. And if you can, I would really appreciate if you can, again, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Twitch, maybe donate if you can. That always helps. And yeah, thank you very much. See you next one. Bye bye.